A while back we made a video on 20 things you missed in Scream. Well, we are back for the sequel, baby. I'm Tilly from What Culture Horror, and these are 20 things you missed in Scream 2. 20. The opening sequence hints at two killers. Scream 2 did a frankly miraculous job of matching the first film's iconic opening sequence, ingeniously taking place at a sneak preview of Stab, a movie adapted from the events of the first Scream film. The scene focuses on two college students, Maureen Evans and Phil Stevens, who are killed by Ghostface during the Stab screening, and also provides a subtle hint about the culprit, or culprits, when Phil takes his fateful trip to the bathroom. There are two Stab fans in front of him, both dressed as Ghostface, who turn around to look at Phil while they're peeing. Whilst it seems innocent enough on a first viewing, on repeat watches it seems to be nodding towards the eventual outcome of there once again being two Ghostface killers, Mickey and Debbie Salt, aka Mrs. Loomis. Number 19. Cinematographer Peter Deming cameos as a cinema employee. In the same sequence, unless you really know your cinematographers, you're unlikely to notice the presence of the film's own director of photography, Peter Deming, making a cameo appearance as one of the cinema's concession stand workers. When Maureen exits the screen to order some popcorn and Pepsi, she's served by Deming, who takes her order and gets to place his own mug front and centre for two shots. There's something funny about the man responsible for delivering the film's cinematic imagery making a cameo as an employee of the people who show movies. Number 18. Freddy Krueger's sweater is hanging in Sidney's dorm room. You're probably well aware that director Wes Craven had a cameo in the first Scream film as Woodsboro High School's janitor, who, in addition to being named Fred, also wore the distinctive striped jumper worn by Freddy Krueger in Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Though Craven does make a cameo in Scream 2 also, we'll get to that later, the Elm Street reference in this film is a little more benign and, well, not a person. Near the start of the film, when Sidney is talking to her roommate Haley in her dorm room, keep your eyes peeled behind Haley and you might notice Freddy Krueger's striped sweater hanging on one of the doors. Number 17. Screenwriter Kevin Williamson cameos as the current edition host. The parade of cameos continues while Sidney and Haley are still hanging out in her dorm room. The TV is airing an episode of Current Edition, a not-so-subtle parody of the TV show Inside Edition, where Cotton Weary is discussing being exonerated for the murder of Sidney's mother, Maureen. But the man interviewing Cotton isn't some random day player, it's Kevin Williamson, the man responsible for writing the first, second, and fourth Scream movies, as well as creating TV shows Dawson's Creek, The Vampire Diaries, and The Following. Surprisingly, this is the only Scream film to date where Williamson made any sort of appearance. Number 16. Randy gets the aliens quote wrong. In the early classroom scene, you'll probably remember the hilarious back and forth where one of the students mentions aliens as an example of a superior sequel, before quoting Sigourney Weaver's Ripley, "Get away from her, you bitch." This causes a frustrated Randy to snap back at him. I believe the line is "stay away from her, you bitch." Except Randy, film geek supreme, is actually incorrect in this case. Jackson's character got the line completely right, which makes the whole exchange even funnier. Rumours suggest that this was a result of Jackson and Kennedy mixing their lines up on set, but whether it's intentional or not, it's a sly way to make fun of Randy's arrogant film nerd obsessiveness. Number 15. Dewey basically guesses everything. In the first act, Dewey pays a visit to Sidney at college to check that she's safe and well, and brings to her attention the possibility of a copycat following in Billy and Stu's footsteps. Dewey briefly speculates on the identity of the killer or killers and basically ends up guessing the whole thing. He says, quote, "Sid, if there is some freaked out psycho trying to follow in Billy Loomis's footsteps, you probably already know him, or her, or them. They're probably already in your life." Not a single lie detected there, Dewey. Number 14. Mickey's camcorder is a huge clue. Mickey, of course, turns out to be one of the film's two killers, which shouldn't be that surprising in retrospect considering that he's shown obsessively taking his camcorder with him everywhere he goes. It's revealed later on that Ghostface has been recording footage of the killings, and given the image quality and maneuverability required of the camera, it's pretty safe to assume the killer was using a compact camcorder like Mickey's. Precisely like Mickey's, in fact. Although it's not exactly a secret that Mickey loves to film around campus, few fans actually put two and two together. 13. Two killers are hinted at just before CiCi dies. Who can forget the iconic murder of CiCi Cooper, who gets attacked at a nearby sorority house and thrown off a balcony? But before she's killed, Ghostface relishes terrorising her over the phone, with CiCi's friend Dawny answering the call and passing it to CiCi, believing the caller to be her boyfriend. However, while Ghostface is talking to Dawny, we can also see the killer entering the hallway of the house behind them. Given that Ghostface clearly isn't operating a phone as they sneak past the pair, it's a pretty definitive implication that there's more than one killer. One making the phone call, the other carrying out the slaying. Number 12. CICI bleeds before she's stabbed. The Scream movies don't have a ton of damning movie mistakes, but there is one extremely noticeable production gaffe when CICI is being attacked by Ghostface. As she stumbles out onto the balcony, Ghostface stabs her in the back, but eagle-eyed viewers might notice that CICI actually has a huge bloodstain already on her back while Ghostface drives the knife into that exact spot. You needn't be a forensic pathologist to know that pools of blood take at least a few seconds to spill out, but in CICI's case it was already there as the blade entered her back. Number 11. A visible crew member was poorly removed with a black square. Who would have thought that we'd have CICI to thank for so many little movie tidbits? Her unforgettable death scene climaxes with Ghostface throwing her off her own balcony, causing her to make a fatal landing on the concrete below. Those who own the DVD version of Scream 2 might well be aware of a classic movie mistake. Whereas CICI sails through the air, a crew member can be briefly seen popping their head up over the balcony. The mistake was widely circulated online in the early 2000s to the extent that Dimension Films themselves became aware of it and offered up a lo-fi corrective for future Blu-ray and streaming releases. Now the offending part of the frame has a black square placed over it, and whilst this blends in well enough with the nighttime background, it also clips slightly over the edge of the balcony. If nothing else, this suggests that somebody wasn't being paid enough to actually fix this problem properly. Number 10. Matthew Lillard's surprise cameo at the sorority party. Surely the most surprising cameo in the entire movie involves an actor whose character actually died in the first Scream. At the sorority party, as Randy emerges with drinks, look behind him and you might notice a somewhat recognisable face out of focus. That is Matthew Lillard, who of course played Killer Stu in the original Scream, and met his brutal end when Sidney dropped a giant TV on his head. A blonde-haired Lillard makes a sneaky cameo here as the uncredited guy at party, who hugs Mickey before moving out of frame. Is the hug an extremely subtle passing of the torch from one killer to another? Perhaps. Number 9. Why the sorority house looks so familiar. If you watch Scream 2 and find yourself wondering why the sorority's fancy house looks so damn familiar, that's probably because it was used in another movie released 2 years earlier, but it just so happens to be a children's film. The very same location, Crank House in California, was used as the house belonging to the evil Miss Trunchbull in the fantastic Danny DeVito directed fantasy comedy Matilda. Evidently a little set dressing was carried out to make the homestead look a little more like a raucous sorority house for Scream 2, but they are 100% the same building. Number 8. Beer bottles hint at Ghostface's identity. Given the attention to detail Wes Craven put into this movie, it's impossible to ignore the fact that basically every beer bottle consumed throughout the movie seems to hint at one of the killer's identities. All the beer the students are seen drinking during the film are green, stubby grenade bottles with the labels ripped off, presumably for legal reasons or because the production didn't want to give out free product placement. But anyone who knows their beer also knows that these distinctively bodied green bottles are part of the Mickey's brand, and so it's not a total coincidence that one of the movie's 2 killers is Mickey. Number 7. Wes Craven's sneaky hospital cameo. Sadly, Wes Craven doesn't reprise the role of Woodsboro High janitor Fred this time around, because it would have been hilarious to see him show up as the janitor of Windsor College. But Craven did nevertheless find another altogether sneakier cameo for himself after poor Derek gets attacked by Ghostface and ends up in the hospital. A cop leads Mickey back out to the hospital hallway, and if you keep your eyes peeled, you might notice a familiar looking man dressed up as a doctor and wearing a pair of glasses. Though he's a little out of focus, Wes Craven fans should be able to recognise the director skulking around in the background for a few seconds. Number 6. That TORI spelling callback. Your age will probably dictate whether you've actually caught this hilarious callback or not. As Dewey and Randy sit down for coffee, the TV is showing a segment discussing the Stab movie, where it's revealed that Beverly Hills 90210 star Tori Spelling is playing Sydney. This inherently amusing cameo becomes even funnier if you remember that in the first Scream, Dewey asks Sydney who would play her in a movie based on the Woodsboro murders. Though Dewey sweetly considers her a Meg Ryan type, Sydney more pessimistically replies, with my luck, they'd cast Tori Spelling. Now that is a callback. Number 5. The truth behind that Friends reference. There are 2 distinct references to Courtney Cox's hit sitcom Friends throughout the movie. Firstly, Randy mentions that David Schwimmer plays Dewey in the first Stab film, and he later says that Gail started smoking after nude pictures of her were posted online, causing Gail to reply that her head was actually photoshopped onto Jennifer Aniston's body. If that line seems like nothing more than a cutesy nod towards her Friends co-star, it was also actually referencing the fact that fake nude photos of Cox were circulated online in the months leading up to Scream 2 going into production. Also, is it just me who finds it really funny that I had to say fake nude photos of Cox? No? Okay. This being the late 90s and all photoshopped celebrity nudes was still a relatively novel concept. Number 4. The lipstick mark on Randy's dead hand. Randy's death is one of the most traumatic and unforgettable moments in the entire movie, followed up by Gail's blood-curdling, scream when she opens the news van to find his gutted corpse inside. But for a few fractions of a second, Craven gives us a shot of Randy's hand, which, while initially appearing to be stained with blood, upon closer inspection actually seems to have a lipstick mark on it. It's a very distinctive shape, and considering we all know that kill was carried out by Mrs. Loomis, it certainly fits her unhinged personality that she'd leave a mark on her victim, even if also leaving crucial DNA behind at the same time. Number 3. David Arquette's father plays the sheriff. Chief Lewis Hartley is a minor character in the movie who heads up the investigation into the Windsor College murders, though has a thorough disdain for Cotton and ends up assigning 2 cops to act as Sidney's bodyguards. Chief Hartley is in fact played by Lewis Arquette, father of David, a veteran character actor who amassed 140 acting credits over his quarter-century acting career prior to his passing in 2001. That he ends up playing a more senior officer alongside his real-life son is just too perfect, and yet not on the nose enough that it would distract even those aware of the relation. Number 2. The bodyguard bleeds before he gets stabbed. In the movie's third act, Ghostface ends up slaughtering both of Sidney's assigned bodyguards, first smashing open the car window and slashing the younger officer's throat. However, look closely and we have another case of a wound appearing before it's actually been administered. The bloody makeup has already been applied to the actor's neck moments before a knife actually passes across it. The scene is at least chaotic enough that it's a little tougher to spot than CICI's magically appearing bloodstain, but even with the magic of editing, the most keen-eyed fans might still notice it after enough viewings. Number 1. The totally obvious bodyguard dummy. Once the younger cop is dealt with, Ghostface assaults but doesn't kill the older cop, at least until he gets back to his feet and pulls a gun. At this point, Ghostface punches the gas and runs him over before driving headfirst into some construction poles, all while the poor guy is still clinging to the windshield. Unsurprisingly, the outcome isn't fun for the policeman, who ends up with a pole sent straight up through his cranium. But mere seconds before the impact, there are 2 distinct shots where we're clearly looking at a not so convincing dummy standing in for the actor. Obviously safety first and all, but in the absence of having a stuntman able to execute the scene, the shot selections could have been a little bit smarter. But then again, the majority of viewers probably have never even given this mistake a second thought. And that's our list. Notice any other details in this sequel that made you scream with excitement? Let us know down in the comment section below. I've been Tilly and this has been What Culture Horror. As always, thank you so much for watching and I hope you and your loved ones are safe and well. Until next time.